What's up everybody, Brian here with BPS Customs, and today we're going to talk about this little guy, but also this little guy. That's right, it's GTX 1070 SLI day here in the office. Let's do it. Before we get into the raw performance numbers, I want to take a minute to talk about dollars and cents. Is it a sound financial decision to set your rig up with two of these new Pascal cards when there are other options that exist? Let's take a closer look. At the top of NVIDIA's product stack remains the venerable Titan X. Unfortunately, this card has been eclipsed both in price and performance by the new Pascal cards that have come out recently. As a result, considering the Titan X at this time would be a little foolish. Next up, we have the newly released GTX 1080. You can find my review of the 1080 along with live SLI benchmarks in my video here. The 1080 sits at a hefty $700 and availability remains an issue. Looking further down the list, we have another Maxwell card and the previous title holder of Best GPU on the Market, the 980 Ti. Although prices of these cards have recently taken a tumble, they're still holding relatively strong between $460 and $600, depending on the manufacturer and configuration of the card. Lastly, we come to the subject of today's video, the GTX 1070. The 1070 is still suffering from the same supply issues that the 1080 is suffering from right now, and as a result, they're still really hard to come by. I wouldn't expect third-party resellers to cut prices on these anytime soon, as the Founders Edition cards are selling out immediately when they're in stock at $450. In fact, a lot of times they are commanding a price premium on the open market. Unfortunately, this means that an SLI setup with two 1070s is going to run you a cool 9 bills. That's 10% less than a Titan X, but 28% more than one 1080 and 80% more than one 980 Ti. Do the performance gains justify the cost? Let's find out. Our test bench for this round of tests and for the foreseeable future is based on the i7-5820K X99 chip. I managed to squeeze out 4.6 GHz from this chip as it's sitting in an X99 Sabertooth motherboard and cooled by a Corsair H80i V2. The setup has 16 gigs of quad-channel Crucial Ballistics DDR4 and a 240 gig ADATA SSD. All tests for the SLI setup were run at both stock frequency and our max achievable overclock. For this test, I was able to get plus 225 MHz on the core and plus 450 MHz on the memory. This resulted in stable temperatures of 62 degrees C under load for the stock settings and 74 degrees C under load for the overclock. These temperatures, while a little bit higher than I'd like, are still within the realm of acceptability and well below the thermal throttling limit for these cards. I think if I dialed in a more aggressive fan curve or even water cooled these cards, you'd see much better temperatures, much more stable overclocks, and you could probably even achieve a little bit higher frequencies. Alright, enough talk. Let's get to the numbers.
Firestrike as usual scales fantastically with SLI. You can see how I was able to achieve almost a true 200% scaling between one 1070 and the SLI setup. The 1070s and SLI really flex their muscle here with super high graphics scores. Similarly, Unigine Heaven is a synthetic benchmark that takes full advantage of SLI implementation. We see fantastic scores here from the two 1070s, although it is pretty obvious that we are hitting a CPU bottleneck, which is pretty ironic considering that we are actually using a heavily overclocked X99 platform chip. You can see that the 1070s put up some pretty ridiculous numbers in our Metro Last Light benchmark. This may indicate that as much as I like Metro Last Light, it might be time to move on to something a little bit newer. If anybody has any suggestions for newer games with built-in benchmarks, let me know in the comments down below. As is evident on this chart, DX12 games like Rise of the Tomb Raider do not scale well with SLI. Given that DX12 has the capability of accessing each GPU individually and directly, in the future, it might actually be possible to achieve higher benchmarking scores in DX12 titles by turning off SLI, as counterintuitive as that may seem.
I also ran a set of benchmarks with SLI enabled at 1440p and 4K. With the graphics setup this powerful, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to limit it to 1080p gaming unless you have a 144Hz monitor and you plan on using all of the 144 draws per second. Here's how the 1070 stacked up at the higher resolutions. You could see that for the money, the GTX 1070 SLI setup provides a huge amount of bang for the buck. $900 is not an easy pill to swallow, but when you compare it to a single 1080, which retails for about $700 and actually sometimes a little bit more than that, the performance gains are clearly there. So what do you think? If you have the opportunity to get your hands on two 1070s, will you? Will you buy a 1080 instead? Will you buy two 1080s instead? Will you wait for the 1080 Ti? Let me know down below in the comments or on Twitter at BPS Customs. Also down below, you notice a couple links to the products that I've talked about in this video, along with all the audio and visual gear I use. All the links down below are through my Amazon affiliate account. If you guys feel like supporting the channel, click those links, maybe make a purchase or two. That's entirely up to you, but every time you do make a purchase, it helps me out just a little bit, and that really helps keep the channel going. Also, get subscribed. I don't know why I did that. Coming soon, I'll have the conclusion of my deep red rebuild, new product reviews, and also a bunch of how-tos. So make sure you don't miss any of that, guys. And as always, thanks for watching.